What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic channel. And today we're talking some college football DFS ahead of Tuesday, October the 10th. Tuesday, yes, it is back. Tuesday football. We've got some Conference USA, some Sun Belt action. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. If you've hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to any of that, thank you. It helps us a ton. We're also sponsored by Prize Picks. They have a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. They're also giving you one free month of Odd Shopper when you click the link in the video description below and take advantage of this. They have college football, NFL, any of the major sports, as well as a ton of niche sports. Odd Shopper is going to help you take advantage of all of that. You must be 21 plus. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Link in the video description below. All right, let's dive into this three-game slate. We kick things off with Louisiana Tech, Middle Tennessee. A pretty good game, 53.5 total, 3-point spread in favor of Middle Tennessee. Pace should be pretty good. Louisiana Tech 78th, Middle Tennessee State 34th. Both teams love to throw. Louisiana Tech 53% pass rate, Middle Tennessee 57. On the Louisiana Tech side, I would anticipate Jack Turner starting this game. They've been using Bachmeier as a backup. Efficiency is almost identical between these guys. You're not really getting much separation in terms of passing efficiency, and both of their stats are muddled because of the injuries. But you can tell based on the pass rate for this team, there's always upside with the Louisiana Tech signal callers if the offense propels them to like a backdoor 300-yard game. Just they both haven't been very efficient. Turner does run more, which is why I generally like him a little bit more. If you want to play this conservatively and play a contrarian Louisiana Tech signal caller, but you're worried about Turner and Bachmeier, just slot in Bachmeier. He's only 400 more than Turner. And if you get news that Turner's starting again, you can just make the swap. $400, use it however you want once the swap is made. The only concern here, if Turner starts and he plays poorly, you could see Bachmeier come in the game. So there is a bit of risk here. This is not my favorite quarterback situation to target, but the offense makes it worthwhile in tournaments. The backfield, Tyree Shelton's kind of emerged as the lead back here, largely because of injuries. Keith Willis is out. Marquise Crosby still not ready to go. Only one carry in the last two games. Their beat reporter thinks it's going to take him some more time. Travis Thornton is a situational change of pace. Players like Keldrick Moody, Jacob Fields, they've only played a handful of snaps in the last couple weeks. All that said, Shelton, he's handled a monstrous workload of late. 23 touches last game. He had 17 the week prior. He's averaging over 100 yards per game. So when he's been given the opportunity, he's played well. He's expensive, especially on FanDuel. But, man, you can play Shelton. Just make sure you're cognizant of the rest of your lineup. He'll be popular, so at least worth noting. Receiving game, it's basically Smoke Harris and Cyrus Allen and everybody else. The route rates for these players are very consistent. Smoke Harris has more yards than Allen. He's been more efficient, and he's running slightly more routes. I think that's also reflected in price. So they're basically the same price-adjusted play, in my opinion. If you want to save the salary, I'm fine playing Cyrus Allen. He's been above 90% of the routes in three of the last 4 games, which is awesome. So I have no issues there. The wide receiver 3 is where things get tricky because you saw the return of Kyle Maxwell. That put True Edwards and Maxwell into a near 50-50 split at wide receiver 3. True Edwards, 52% of the routes. Maxwell, 41%. There's a chance that it rises for Maxwell because he hasn't been involved in the offense much after the injury. But they're the same price. These would be just situational guys. Not a ton of interest there. Nate Jones, Ryan Rivera splitting tight end. Also not a lot of interest there. Focusing on Smoke and Cyrus. Middle Tennessee, again, fast, really pass heavy. Nicholas Vadiato has been really inefficient, but the volume is so good for him. The Louisiana Tech defense shouldn't scare you. They're pretty good against the pass, but they're also very giving against the run. Fortunately, Vadiato can run. 136 yards there so far this year, but he has 38 pass attempts per game. I wouldn't rank him in the top 3 signal callers, but he's probably number 4 for me at 7K. Frank Peason and Jaden Credle, almost a 50-50 timeshare. The snaps weren't quite as close, but workload pretty similar between these guys. My question is, does this persist? Because you look at overall snaps, I was very surprised to see Peason at 51, and Cradle at 24, because their touches were almost identical. So it's a question I have. Does this move wider in Peason's favor as it had previously? I don't know, but it's at least worth mentioning. He also is the preferred pass catching back between the two, basically doubling up Cradle's routes. The receiving game is pretty condensed. Elijah Metcalf is the alpha for this team, not particularly close. If you can get your way to Metcalf, I think you just do that. From there, they use Holden Willis, Justin Olsen, and DJ England Chisholm. All of them had 70% of the routes or more. Olsen and Willis were at 79%. So that's noteworthy. They cut the rotation quite a bit. Players like Javonte Sherman, 21% of routes. Jeremy Tate, 16. Kalani Norris, 6. Kellen Stewart got hurt, so there's not really too much to see there. But all this to say, they trimmed the route share significantly for this team, which now I think you can focus all of your attention on Metcalf, Olsen, Willis, and England Chisholm. There's players at every single price range, all the way from your expensive Alpha and Metcalf, all the way down to England Chisholm at 4,100. Last thing I'll say about England Chisholm, 91 yards, does not look good on the year. He dropped a surefire bomb last week. Just an absolute dime piece from Vadiato right in his hands. Would have been a massive touchdown drop. This could look a lot better if he even just catches that one pass. Liberty, Jacksonville State, 56 total, 56.5. Spread is 6 points in favor of Liberty. They've taken a ton of money. Expect this to maybe come in closer to a touchdown at kickoff. Liberty is slower, 117th, but very run heavy, 34.5% pass rate. Jacksonville State is incredibly fast. They're first in pace, but they only pass the ball. Well, I guess I should say, yeah, they pass the ball 38.5% of the time. Two very run heavy teams in this spot. Jacksonville State is very fortunate to have the record they do. They've been outgained in terms of yards per play multiple times this year in games they won. I think they're suspect, and they're potentially looking at like a blowout loss here. Caden Salter, he's expensive, but it's really hard to knock the floor ceiling combo of him. He is the best individual signal caller and the safest on the slate. Hyper efficient, 235 yards through the air per game, 306 on the ground, doesn't take a lot of sacks. Salter has the best floor ceiling combo of any player on this slate. The backfield's been really injured. Last week, Billy Lucas suited up, but he didn't take the field, even when Quentin Cooley got banged up for a little bit. Instead, they moved to James Jointer and Aaron Bedgood, who's this hybrid receiver running back type player. But Billy Lucas, he's listed probable for the game. Prior to the absence, it was basically a 60-40 split in favor of Cooley over Lucas. Both of them are playable. Both of them should find efficiency here. Jacksonville State has looked good against the run previously, but they have not faced a rushing attack like this. I'll be mixing and matching both of these players. They're also affordable on FanDuel. Receiving game for Liberty, Noah Frith missed the last game. I don't know if he's going to come back. It's hard to get good Liberty reporting. But that somewhat condensed the route share. CJ Daniels and Elijah Smoot over 80% of the routes. Bentley Hanshaw, 61%. Trayon Sibley, 61%. Aaron Bedgood, 50, but some of that had to do with him lining up a running back a ton. I would expect this to fall. And then tight end Austin Henderson at 43%. I think this is probably the way they want to play, using CJ Daniels and Elijah Smoot as the 1-2, Sibley is the 3 for the most part. Hanshaw is your tight end. But I do think Frith returning would kind of ding each of these guys a little bit. Maybe instead of 80% of the routes for Sibley and Smoot, Daniels and Smoot, you're probably closer to 70. For Sibley, maybe instead of 60% of the routes, you're at 50. And I would expect Frith to come in around 50 himself. Hanshaw is probably the one that's least affected. He's basically been somewhere between 50 and 70% of the routes in every game. I would expect that to persist. But pricing on these guys, think it's still affordable, especially a guy like Smoot at 41. Awesome route share. His target, 17. They're tied for second on the team. Henshaw as well at 43. I imagine these two will be popular, with Daniels really popping at the top because of his efficiency. Jacksonville State, they're rotating quarterbacks. It's essentially impossible to predict at this point. Zion Webb has been a much better rusher. Smothers has been a slightly better quarterback passing, but neither of them have been particularly efficient through the air. The turnover-worthy plays versus big-time throw ratio is ridiculous here. I'm terrified to play any Jacksonville State guys if they're playing from behind, which is likely the case in this game as nearly 7-point underdogs. Smothers and Webb, they are 6 and 7 in the quarterback rankings. They are the worst quarterback situation to target on the board. Malik Jackson, 21 carries last week. He also had 2 targets. Also missed a slight portion of that game with an injury, but he was able to return. Anwar Lewis, he did touch the ball a fair amount last game as well. 8 carries, and he saw 1 target in the pass game. This is sort of what we expected once he was able to return. This guy led the team in rushing last year, but Malik Jackson, since the Ron Wiggins injury, has been forced into a feature back role for a team that has crazy pace and a really heavy run rate, which is not sustainable. And we've already seen him get dinged up. Now, typically teams like this want to use 2 backs, even if it's a 70-30 split, 60-40 split, whatever it is. So Anwar Lewis, I think, is an interesting GPP play at 43, but Malik Jackson, he still has to be among the top running backs. I don't think price adjusted he's going to be among the top. You've got the App State backs, the Liberty backs, like Shelton in a different matchup. But for tournaments, I think Jackson's just fine. The receivers for Jacksonville State, oh my, this is the most frustrating situation on the entire board. Luckily, they don't pass a ton, but the routes are just so inconsistent game in, game out. Essentially, you're going to see Perry Carter, Quentin Lane, Sean Brown, Sterling Galban, Michael Pettaway, and Jamari Joyner all run somewhere between 35 and 70% of the routes. Who does what? I don't know. So last week, Quentin Lane, 55% of the routes, week prior, 80%. Sean Brown, 76% of the routes, week prior, 40%. Malik Jackson, he's consistent, but he's a running back. Sterling Galban, 36% of routes, week prior, 69%. Michael Pettaway, 55% of routes, last week, 80%. And this has been the pattern all year. It's like ping-ponging route rates for all of these guys with no consistency, nobody emerging as the one. I don't know how you play any Jacksonville State receiver with any confidence. I think immediately you have to try to get to like Perry Carter, Quentin Lane, but they're also expensive. Am I playing Quentin Lane at 6,100 even over like CJ Daniels at 56? Absolutely not. I probably will end up with 0 Jacksonville State receivers just with the volatility they provide, not only with the offense, but just their route rates aren't even consistent. Last game, Coastal App State, the best game for DFS, 60.5 total, 6.5 point spread in favor of App State. 2 fairly fast teams, Coastal 69th, App State 41st. Coastal with a 55% pass rate, App State coming in at 47%. Grayson McCall, 6K. I think you could strongly argue he's the strongest price-adjusted signal caller on this slate. App State's defense does not scare you. He's throwing the ball 33.5 times per game, and he has some mobility. Hasn't displayed it a lot this year, but McCall's a vet. We've seen him play and seen him run multiple times. I love playing him at 6K. The backfield, Reese White and CJ Beasley have both been injured. They're coming off a bye, so maybe that's gotten them healthier, but you're still looking best case scenario, a 3-way committee for Beasley and White. The worst case scenario for those guys is probably the best case scenario for Braden Bennett because of the injuries. He actually popped up for a 15-carry game in their last contest with 3 targets. Now this requires Reese White and Beasley to be out or limited, and they'll try to get Max Balthazar in there a little bit too. But Bennett, I think, is the best guy to target for upside, followed by Beasley, and that's mainly just price thing. Receiving game is extremely easy to decipher. Sam Pinckney, Jared Brown, Tyson Mobley, those are your 3 guys. And you probably want to focus your attention on Pinckney and Brown. Awesome route shares and target shares. Pinckney averaging 88.5 yards per game. Brown at 63. Brown will get carries here and there as well in the backfield. I think you want one of these 2 guys in most of your lineups, especially if you're stacking with McCall. Mobley would be the tournament play to look at. They use 3 tight ends. If you're playing one of them, it's probably Kendall Carr, but Lamo, he plays a decent amount too. I think it's kind of tough to play a tight end or a Jamison Tucker, one of the wide receiver 4 types for Coastal. App State, Ryan Berger might return. I kind of hope he doesn't because I think Joey Aguilar is better. He runs a lot, 124 yards cumulatively. App State passes a fair amount and they play fast. So he averages 32.5 attempts per game, 244 yards. This is a good opportunity for Aguilar. I would rank him 3rd among quarterbacks on this slate behind Grayson McCall and Salter, but right in the mix. Running back Nate Noel, it's hard for me to imagine he's not the number 1 running back play on most boards today. He's averaging 129 yards per game solely on the ground, and he's averaging 2.8 targets per game with another 9.5 yards there. This is 26.8 touches per game for Nate Noel, and McQuell Haywood's questionable. They're not using Kanye Roberts or Amani Marshall much at all as change of paces. Nate Noel, there's a good argument for him to be the first guy in your lineup. Receiver, this should be a fun position because App State's pretty explosive on offense. I'm going to give you the routes to make this a little easier to decipher. The route rates, I think, will be fairly consistent. It should be Caden Robinson and Christian Horn as two full-time receivers. Then there's a bit of a rotation. Deshaun Davis, his last two route rates were 41% and 35%. He's mixing with Dalton Stroman, last 2 weeks, 32%, 33%. And Mekhi Jackson, 32%, 22%. Even Milan Tucker, 41%, 44%. So you can see outside Caden Robinson and Christian Horn, it's Deshaun Davis, Dalton Stroman, Mekhi Jackson, and Milan Tucker all in a rotation. Tight end, this is noteworthy. Miller Gibbs hasn't played in a while. There hasn't been an update on his status. But without him, Eli Wilson's route rate the last 2 weeks has been 81% and 71%. So Eli Wilson at 3,200, if Miller Gibbs is out, would be like your punt, play, fit all the studs in your lineup type. He's been inefficient, but his opportunity is actually good. 3.6 targets per game this year for a 3,200 guy, I think is just fine. But that'll do it for the slate. Let me know in the comment section what you think of this, if I missed anything. If you have a question, reach out on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. We'll be back tomorrow and every day this week breaking down the DFS slates. So until then, good luck, everyone. We'll see you next time.